Welcome to the Gripping Stories channel. On this occasion, I will tell a story titled, The First and Last Night of the Bride. I also want to pray that all of us, along with our beloved families, are always granted good health, blessings, and protection from all dangers. For those who haven't subscribed yet, let's keep supporting by clicking the subscribe button and don't forget to like, so we can stay motivated to bring more horror content. Thank you for your support. Now, here's the story. It was the summer of 1982, when Jennifer and Mark Hadley arrived at Hollow Ridge, a quiet, picturesque town in Vermont. They had chosen the secluded Hollow Ridge Inn for their honeymoon, a quaint bed and breakfast nestled deep within the dense woods. The newlyweds, both brimming with joy, had a glow that seemed to light up the dimly lit hallways of the inn. The townsfolk whispered their blessings, but some, with hushed voices, warned of the town's dark history. Jennifer dismissed it as local superstition. After their celebratory dinner, Mark suggested a walk through the moonlit trail behind the inn. Jennifer, in her flowing white dress, twirled along the dirt path, laughing as her husband hummed a slow waltz. The forest echoed with her laughter, but something about the silence beyond the trees unsettled Mark. He kept glancing over his shoulder, feeling an inexplicable chill, but Jennifer's smile reassured him. An elderly woman from the inn had approached them earlier, warning them not to venture too far past the old wooden bridge at the end of the trail. "No good comes from crossing it at night," she muttered. Mark brushed off the warning, but Jennifer, curious and playful, insisted on exploring further. "It's just a bridge," she said with a soft laugh. The couple reached the weathered bridge, its wooden planks creaking under their feet. Jennifer leaned over the side, staring at the sluggish creek below. The air was heavy, and the forest around them seemed unnaturally quiet. Mark felt uneasy, urging Jennifer to return, but she was mesmerized by the eerie beauty of the spot. As they turned to leave, Mark froze. He thought he saw a shadow moving in the woods, something tall and unnatural. "Did you see that?" he asked Jennifer, who shook her head, teasing him for being paranoid. But the shadow lingered in his mind, an omen he couldn't shake. The couple made their way back to the inn, the forest now darker than before. Jennifer, still full of energy, decided to take a shortcut along the old road leading to the inn. As they walked, the faint sound of an engine echoed through the night. Mark turned to see headlights in the distance, moving unnaturally fast for such a narrow, winding road. Before either of them could react, the truck swerved toward them. Mark shouted, pulling Jennifer back, but her dress caught on the undergrowth. The truck didn't slow down, its blaring horn a warning too late. Jennifer's scream was cut short as the vehicle struck her, the impact echoing through the forest. Mark collapsed to his knees, clutching the bloodied remains of Jennifer's veil. The truck, an old rusted vehicle with no license plate, disappeared into the darkness, leaving no trace. The town sheriff conducted an investigation, but no one could find any records of a truck fitting the description. In the months that followed, locals reported sightings of a woman in a white dress wandering the forest near the bridge. Some claimed to hear her laughter, while others swore they saw her standing in the middle of the road, vanishing just as their headlights approached. To this day, visitors to Hollow Ridge are warned about the bridge and the old road. Jennifer's tragic death became a ghost story for the town, a cautionary tale for lovers venturing too far into the unknown. Mark never returned, but every year on their anniversary, fresh flowers appear on the bridge, a silent tribute to a love that ended too soon. A year after Jennifer's tragic death, Hollow Ridge became a hotspot for paranormal enthusiasts. Among them was Claire Dempsey, a young journalist with a penchant for investigating local legends. Claire had heard the tale of the ghost bride from a colleague and was determined to uncover the truth. She arrived at Hollow Ridge Inn in July 1983, armed with a camera, a tape recorder, and a skeptical mindset. The innkeeper, Mrs. Winthrop, welcomed Claire but seemed uneasy when the journalist mentioned her purpose. "You shouldn't go looking for her," Mrs. Winthrop said in a low voice, her eyes darting to the window. "Some things are better left alone." Claire dismissed the warning with a polite smile, chalking it up to small-town superstition. Claire spent her first night exploring the forest trail. She reached the infamous bridge just as the sun set, its shadows stretching across the worn planks. With her camera ready, she recorded the stillness of the area. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but then, faintly, she heard it. A soft, melodic hum, like a lullaby carried on the breeze. Claire froze, her breath hitching. The sound grew clearer, unmistakably a woman's voice. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, yet it sent chills down her spine. "Is someone there?" she called out, her voice trembling. The singing stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of footsteps on the bridge. Turning to face the sound, Claire gasped. A white veil fluttered through the air as though carried by an unseen hand. She raised her camera, snapping photos frantically, but when she reviewed them, there was nothing but empty darkness. Still, the veil seemed to beckon her, drifting further into the woods. Claire followed the veil, her flashlight cutting through the dense foliage. As she ventured deeper, she felt the oppressive silence enveloping her, broken only by the crunch of her boots on the undergrowth. Suddenly, she spotted movement, a shadowy figure darting between the trees. It was tall and misshapen, much like the one Mark Hadley had described. Panicked, Claire turned back toward the bridge, but the path seemed to twist and change before her eyes. Her flashlight flickered, and in the dim light, she saw a woman standing on the road ahead. The figure wore a tattered wedding dress, its once white fabric now stained and torn. Claire called out, but the woman didn't respond. As Claire approached, the woman's head slowly turned. Her face was pale, her eyes dark and hollow. "Why did you come here?" the woman whispered, her voice layered with sorrow and anger. Before Claire could answer, the sound of a truck's engine roared to life behind her. She turned, but there was no vehicle, only the blinding glare of phantom headlights rushing toward her. Claire screamed and dove off the road, landing hard on the forest floor. The headlights vanished, and when she looked up, the ghostly bride was gone. Shaking, Claire scrambled back to the inn, clutching her equipment. She locked herself in her room, replaying the audio from her recorder. Amidst the static, a voice whispered, "Leave, while you still can." The next morning, Claire packed her things and left Hollow Ridge. She published an article about her experience, sparking even more interest in the town. However, she never returned, haunted by the memory of that night. Locals claim that Jennifer's spirit grows more restless with each passing year, targeting those who dare to disturb her peace. For the people of Hollow Ridge, her tragic tale serves as both a warning and a reminder. Some tragedies are never truly laid to rest. Word of Claire's encounter spread quickly, drawing thrill seekers and ghost hunters to Hollow Ridge. Among them were 3 college friends, Ethan, Julia, and Chris, who decided to spend their summer break chasing paranormal stories. Hollow Ridge was their first stop, and the story of the ghost bride intrigued them. They booked a room at the inn and prepared for an adventure. Mrs. Winthrop, the innkeeper, eyed them warily when they asked about Jennifer. "That poor girl deserves peace," she muttered, shaking her head. "You won't find anything but regret if you go looking for her." Ethan laughed it off, but Julia couldn't ignore the tremor in the old woman's voice. That night, the trio ventured into the woods with flashlights, cameras, and a Ouija board. They followed the trail to the bridge, its rotting planks glowing faintly under the moonlight. Julia hesitated, sensing an oppressive energy, but Ethan, eager to impress, crossed without a second thought. Chris followed closely behind, leaving Julia no choice but to join them. As they set up their equipment, the air grew colder and the forest fell silent. They began their Ouija session, asking questions about Jennifer. At first nothing happened, but then the planchette began to move on its own. It spelled out a single word: leave. Ethan, grinning nervously, asked another question. "Jennifer, are you here with us?" The board didn't respond, but a faint sobbing sound echoed from the trees. Julia froze, her flashlight trembling in her hand. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Chris nodded, his face pale. The sobbing grew louder, transforming into a wail of anguish that seemed to come from all directions. Then they saw her, a figure in a tattered wedding dress emerging from the shadows. Her face was obscured by a veil, but her presence exuded an overwhelming sadness. "Run!" Julia gasped, tugging at Ethan's arm, but he stood frozen in place, transfixed by the apparition. The bride raised her head, revealing hollow, dark eyes and a mouth twisted in pain. "Why won't you let me rest?" she cried, her voice echoing through the forest. Suddenly, the sound of a truck engine shattered the silence. Headlights appeared on the bridge, barreling toward them at an impossible speed. The friends scrambled off the road, the phantom vehicle passing through them before vanishing into the night. When they looked back, the bride was gone. Terrified, they abandoned their equipment and ran back to the inn. Mrs. Winthrop was waiting for them, her expression grim. "You saw her, didn't you?" she asked. None of them answered, but their silence spoke volumes. She sighed heavily. "You've stirred her grief. It's best you leave now." The trio left Hollow Ridge at dawn, shaken and silent. Ethan never spoke of the experience again, but Julia became obsessed with learning more about Jennifer's story. Chris, however, refused to talk about what he saw that night, insisting that some mysteries are better left unsolved. For Hollow Ridge, their visit was just another chapter in the ghost bride's tale, a reminder that her sorrow lingers, waiting for the next unwelcome guest. Years passed, but the tale of Jennifer, the ghost bride, continued to haunt Hollow Ridge. By 1989, the story had become a local legend, attracting tourists and investigators alike. Among them was Sam Walker, a history professor from Boston with a deep interest in folklore. Unlike most visitors, Sam wasn't there to chase ghosts. He wanted to uncover the historical truth behind Jennifer's tragedy. Sam's research led him to old town records stored in the Hollow Ridge Library. With the help of the elderly librarian, Mrs. Carver, he sifted through marriage licenses, accident reports, and newspaper clippings. Strangely, there was no official record of Jennifer or her accident. It was as if she had never existed. This only deepened Sam's curiosity. Determined to find answers, Sam decided to retrace Jennifer's final steps. He visited the bridge at dusk, the woods cloaked in a golden haze. As he stood on the creaking planks, he felt a sudden chill, as though the air itself had grown heavier. The forest around him grew unnaturally silent, and a sense of unease settled in his chest. Suddenly, he heard faint laughter echoing from the trees, a sound both joyful and haunting. He turned toward the source and saw a figure in white, her dress glowing faintly in the fading light. She was standing at the edge of the woods, her veil flowing as though caught in an invisible breeze. Sam called out, "Jennifer, is that you?" The figure didn't respond but turned and began walking deeper into the forest. Without thinking, Sam followed, his heart pounding in his chest. He stumbled over roots and rocks, the figure always just out of reach, leading him further from the path. The deeper he went, the darker the forest became. The laughter had faded, replaced by the soft sound of sobbing. Sam hesitated, realizing he had no idea where he was. The figure stopped ahead of him, her back turned. "Why did you follow me?" a soft, sorrowful voice asked. Sam froze. "I want to help," he said, his voice trembling. "I want to know your story." The figure turned to face him, her veil lifting slightly. Her face was pale, her eyes empty voids that seemed to pull him in. "You can't help me," she whispered. "No one can." Before Sam could respond, the forest seemed to shift around him. Trees bent unnaturally, and the ground beneath his feet felt unsteady. A blinding light appeared ahead, a pair of headlights cutting through the darkness. The sound of a truck engine roared to life, growing louder and louder. Panicked, Sam turned and ran, the ghostly vehicle chasing him through the woods. Just as the lights were about to overtake him, he tripped and fell, bracing for impact. But when he opened his eyes, he was back on the bridge, the forest silent once more. There was no sign of the truck or the ghostly bride. Shaken but determined, Sam left Hollow Ridge the next morning, vowing to continue his research from a distance. Despite his skepticism, he couldn't deny what he had experienced. The ghost bride's sorrow was real, and her story remained a mystery, one that no amount of historical records could ever fully explain. In the summer of 1992, Hollow Ridge prepared for its annual Harvest Festival. Despite the town's eerie reputation, the festival was a cheerful event that drew visitors from nearby areas. Among the guests that year was a young couple, Lisa and David, who were celebrating their engagement. They had heard the ghost stories but saw them as harmless tales to enhance the town's mystique. The festival was lively, with lanterns strung across the town square and music filling the air. Lisa and David danced late into the evening, their love radiating through every movement. At one point, an elderly man approached them, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. "You remind me of someone," he said softly. "Be careful if you wander past the bridge tonight. Some dances end too soon." The couple laughed off the cryptic warning, assuming it was part of the town's lore. After the festivities, David suggested they take a walk to cool off before heading back to their bed and breakfast. Lisa agreed, her cheeks still flushed from the excitement. The moon was bright, illuminating the familiar trail toward the infamous bridge. The night was serene, the sounds of the festival fading behind them. As they reached the bridge, David noticed something unusual. A faint melody drifted through the air, like the soft strains of a violin. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Lisa nodded, her brow furrowing. The music seemed to beckon them, pulling them further onto the bridge. Standing in the center, Lisa noticed a figure at the far end, illuminated by the moonlight. It was a woman in a wedding dress, her back to them, swaying gently to the music. "Is that someone from the festival?" Lisa whispered. David shook his head, uneasy. "I don't think so." As they watched, the woman turned slowly to face them. Her face was partially obscured by a veil, but her hollow eyes locked onto theirs. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. The music grew louder, more discordant, and the woman extended her hand toward them. "Dance with me," she said, her voice a haunting echo. David grabbed Lisa's hand, whispering, "We need to go." But as they turned to leave, the air seemed to thicken, and the bridge groaned under their feet. The woman appeared in front of them, blocking their path. "Don't leave me," she pleaded, her voice filled with anguish. Panicked, Lisa screamed, and the sound seemed to break the spell. The woman's expression twisted into one of anger as the bridge began to shake violently. A deafening roar filled the air, the sound of a truck engine. Headlights appeared out of nowhere, barreling toward them. David pulled Lisa off the bridge just as the phantom truck sped past, its horn blaring. When they looked back, the woman was gone and the bridge was eerily still. Trembling, they ran back to town, their joy from the evening replaced by fear. The next morning, the couple shared their experience with Mrs. Winthrop, the innkeeper. She listened quietly, then said, "The bride appears to those who remind her of what she lost. She'll keep searching for someone to take her place. Be grateful she let you go." Lisa and David left Hollow Ridge that same day, their engagement forever marked by the ghostly bride's lament. The festival continued the next year, but no one dared to dance near the bridge at night again. By the late 1990s, Hollow Ridge's eerie reputation had begun to overshadow its charm. Many visitors came not for the serene woods or cozy inns, but for the ghost stories, particularly the tale of Jennifer, the ghost bride. Among the curious was a travel blogger named Erica Fields, whose popular series, Haunted Horizons, documented visits to supposedly haunted locations. Her goal was simple: debunk the myths or capture proof of the supernatural. Erica arrived in Hollow Ridge one crisp October evening, the chill in the air adding to the town's ominous atmosphere. She checked into the Hollow Ridge Inn and immediately began asking questions about Jennifer. The innkeeper, Mrs. Winthrop, sighed heavily. "You're not the first to come looking for her," she said, "but some who look don't come back the same." Erica smirked, brushing off the warning. That night, Armed with her camera and recorder, Erica ventured to the old bridge. The forest was unnaturally quiet, the only sound her boots crunching against the gravel path. She reached the bridge just as the moon emerged from behind a cloud, casting a silvery light over the worn wooden planks. Setting up her equipment, she began recording, narrating Jennifer's story for her audience. As she spoke, a soft sound interrupted her. Footsteps, faint but distinct, coming from the other end of the bridge. Erica turned her camera toward the noise, her pulse quickening. A shadowy figure appeared, emerging from the darkness. It was a woman in a tattered wedding dress, her veil covering her face. "Jennifer," Erica called out, her voice steady despite the fear creeping up her spine. The figure stopped, tilting her head as if listening. Then she began to hum a mournful tune, the sound echoing eerily through the woods. Erica stepped closer, her camera trained on the apparition. "Why are you here?" she asked. The bride's humming ceased, and she lifted her veil slightly, revealing dark, hollow eyes that seemed to pierce Erica's soul. "I'm waiting," she whispered. Erica's breath caught in her throat. "Waiting for what?" she managed to ask. The bride's lips twisted into a sorrowful smile. "For someone to take my place." Before Erica could react, the temperature plummeted and the sound of an engine roared to life behind her. She turned to see headlights blazing toward her, the phantom truck speeding across the bridge. She froze, unable to move as the horn blared, deafening in the stillness. At the last moment, she threw herself off the bridge, landing hard on the ground below. When she looked up, the truck was gone, and the bride stood at the edge of the bridge, staring down at her. "You shouldn't have come," the ghost said softly, before fading into the shadows. Shaking, Erica scrambled to her feet and ran back to the inn, leaving her equipment behind. The next morning she returned to retrieve her gear, but the bridge was empty. Her camera and recorder were intact, but the footage was corrupted, the screen filled with static. Only her narration remained, interrupted by faint humming and a single whispered word: "Leave." Erica left Hollow Ridge that day, her blog post about the experience vague and uncharacteristically subdued. She never returned to the town, and her series soon ended. Locals say her encounter was a warning, a reminder that the bride's sorrow is not a story to be exploited. Those who disturb her risk becoming part of her endless lament. In 2003, Hollow Ridge's haunted reputation drew the attention of a paranormal investigation team called Beyond the Veil. Known for their cutting-edge equipment and live-streamed explorations, the group saw Jennifer's story as the perfect opportunity to boost their growing popularity. The team, comprising lead investigator Jake, medium Eleanor, tech specialist Ryan, and skeptic Lisa, arrived at the Hollow Ridge Inn with an arsenal of cameras, sensors, and audio devices. Mrs. Winthrop, the innkeeper, was less than thrilled by their arrival. "You kids have no idea what you're dealing with," she warned as they unloaded their equipment. "Jennifer isn't just a ghost. She's a wound this town can't heal." Jake, eager to maintain his confident persona for the stream, simply thanked her and promised to be respectful. That evening, the group set up their gear near the infamous bridge. Eleanor, the medium, immediately sensed an oppressive energy in the area. "She's here," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "She's been watching us since we arrived." Jake dismissed her concerns, insisting they proceed with the investigation. The team conducted an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon session, asking Jennifer to communicate. At first, there was only static, but then faintly, a woman's voice emerged. "Why won't you let me rest?" The voice was filled with pain, sending chills through the group. "Jennifer," Eleanor whispered, "what do you want?" Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and the sound of soft footsteps echoed across the bridge. The group turned to see a figure in white standing at the far end. Her veil obscured her face, but her presence was unmistakable. Cameras captured the faint glow of her dress, and Ryan's temperature sensors detected a sharp drop near her location. Lisa, the skeptic, stepped forward cautiously. "Jennifer, we're just here to understand your story," she said. The bride lifted her head slightly, her hollow eyes locking onto Lisa. "Leave," she whispered, her voice carrying an edge of warning. "You don't belong here." Jake, determined to get a dramatic moment for their stream, ignored the warning and moved closer with his camera. "Jennifer, what happened to you? Why do you haunt this place?" he demanded. The bride's demeanor changed instantly. Her sorrow turned to fury, and the sound of a truck engine roared to life behind them. Headlights appeared out of nowhere, barreling toward the group. The horn blared, deafening and terrifying, as the phantom truck sped across the bridge. The team scattered, barely escaping the ghostly vehicle. When they regrouped, the bride was gone, and the bridge stood eerily still. The team reviewed their footage back at the inn. The video showed the bride and the truck, but as the vehicle passed, the screen filled with static, and the audio captured only her haunting whisper, "You were warned." Eleanor insisted they leave immediately, but Jake, stubborn and desperate for content, wanted to stay. That night, Jake vanished. The team searched the woods and the bridge but found no trace of him. His camera was discovered on the bridge the next morning, its lens shattered. The final clip showed Jake walking toward the bride, her voice whispering one last word, "Stay." The remaining team members left Hollow Ridge, traumatized and shaken. They disbanded beyond the veil, unable to continue their work after what happened. Locals believe Jake became part of Jennifer's tragic tale, a reminder that her warning is not to be ignored. To this day, his fate remains a mystery, another unsolved piece of the bride's haunting legend. In 2015, after years of declining tourism, Hollow Ridge attempted to rebrand itself. The town leaned into its eerie reputation, launching ghost tours and hosting a haunted Hollow festival. While many locals disapproved, believing the events would provoke Jennifer's spirit, the younger residents saw it as a way to save their struggling community. Among the festival attendees was Mia Carter, a documentarian working on a series about how small towns grapple with their paranormal legends. Unlike others, Mia wasn't there to mock or exploit. She wanted to understand the emotional toll the Ghost Bride story had taken on Hollow Ridge. Yet, as curious as she was, she couldn't resist exploring the infamous bridge. On the last night of the festival, Mia joined a ghost tour led by a charismatic guide named Nathan. The group walked through the woods, their flashlights casting long, eerie shadows. As they neared the bridge, Nathan regaled them with exaggerated tales of Jennifer's death. "They say if you hear her crying, it's already too late," he said, smirking. Mia, however, noticed something odd. The closer they got, the quieter the woods became. Standing on the bridge, the group listened intently as Nathan encouraged them to call out to Jennifer. Several attendees jokingly shouted her name, their laughter echoing through the dark. Mia stayed silent, a growing sense of dread building in her chest. Then faintly, she heard it. A soft, mournful cry carried on the wind. The laughter stopped. Everyone fell silent, their eyes darting nervously across the bridge. The crying grew louder, accompanied by the faint sound of footsteps. A woman's figure appeared at the far end of the bridge, her veil glowing faintly in the moonlight. "Is this part of the show?" someone asked, their voice trembling. Nathan's grin faded, and he took a step back. "No," he whispered. The bride moved closer, her hollow eyes visible beneath the veil. "Why do you laugh?" she asked, her voice a mix of sorrow and anger. The group froze, paralyzed by her presence. "You mock my pain," she continued, her tone rising. "You call to me as if I'm a game." The bridge began to tremble, and the sound of a truck engine roared to life. Headlights appeared, illuminating the terrified faces of the group. "Run!" Nathan shouted, but the lights seemed to surround them, cutting off their escape. Mia dropped to her knees, clutching her camera as the ghostly truck sped past. When the lights vanished, the bride stood at the center of the bridge, her figure flickering like a dying flame. She pointed to Nathan, her voice echoing through the woods. "You brought them here. Now you'll stay with me." Nathan screamed as the bride lunged toward him, her veil wrapping around his body like tendrils of smoke. In an instant, he was gone. The remaining group fled in terror, leaving their equipment behind. Mia, though shaken, stayed long enough to retrieve her camera. When she reviewed the footage later, it showed the bride's figure pulling Nathan into the shadows, her empty eyes staring directly into the lens. Hollow Ridge canceled the Haunted Hollow Festival after that night, and the ghost tours ceased altogether. The town reverted to its quiet, haunted existence, with locals warning outsiders to stay away from the bridge. Mia never published her documentary, choosing instead to keep Jennifer's story private. Jennifer's spirit, they say, became more vengeful after that night. Her sorrow had turned to fury, her haunting a reminder that some wounds should not be exploited. The bridge stands as a silent witness to her tragedy, a place where the living and the dead collide, and where no one dares to laugh again. Thank you so much for watching until this moment. I truly appreciate your valuable time. Wishing you a wonderful day filled with joy and beauty. See you next time.